Experts in the Wire is sponsored by BuzzSumo, where you can find the key influencers to promote your content. I kind of like doing the little sponsor spot here at the beginning. Okay, roll tape. I'm just kidding, it's just me. I'm going to hit play now. This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer? Experts in the Wire, episode 77. Wes Walls. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 77 of Experts on the Wire. The story of how today's guest ended up on the show starts all the way back on July 18th, 2016. I received an email and it said, I read your SEO for Musicians article on Moz a while ago. It's the only one I've ever read on the topic that actually gets to the heart of it. Awesome article. Thank you. I'm working on a panel picker for SMS. Sorry, I totally messed it up. Why can't I talk today? SXSW, South by Southwest. That's why I've never said the actual letters like that. 2017 on the topic of SEO for musicians. That might be my worst mess up ever on the air, quote on the air. I would love to have you on the panel as an SEO expert. Would you be interested? I didn't end up speaking on the panel, but I did help connect him with Mike King, who did participate on the panel. Then, June 20th of this year, almost a year later, I received an email reply to that same thread from a year ago. It was funny how it just bumps right back up to the top of your inbox. And it was Wes again. He said, I was wondering if you'd be interested to chat about music SEO on your podcast. I ended up publishing a 130-page ebook, did the panel at South by Southwest, I said it correctly, and I've written tons of blog posts, done webinars, spoken all about SEO for musicians, and we at Bandzoogle also implemented some Schema.org on 30,000 musician member websites. Now, to the listeners out there, as you probably know by now, I'm very hesitant to accept pitches, but I looked at Bandzoogle's SEMrush stats. Their organic growth has really skyrocketed this last year. I looked at their website. It looks beautiful, great kind of branding and messaging. And I reread Wes's email, and it really wasn't a pitch. And I know, Wes, you're listening to all this, so I'm like talking about you with you there. But you actually seem very genuine, organic, and like just interested in chatting about these topics. So today, I want to find out how Bandzoogle is growing. And we're also going to chat about SEO for musicians with lessons for all artists, creatives, and entrepreneurs. Wes, welcome. How are you?
Good morning. Good. How are you?
I am excellent. I'm considering editing that little intro where I completely messed up saying South by Southwest, but I'll figure that out. Anyways, before we chat about SEO for musicians, the growth of Bandzoogle, I want to ask a little bit about your background, Wes. It looks like as you got into marketing, they were in slightly shadier areas like online dating, iGaming affiliates, but then moved on to higher grounds like iProspect and now Bandzoogle. So how did you end up in marketing and SEO?
Oh man, yeah, going way back there. Yeah, well, I was focused on my music at the time, so I come from sort of a music background. Went to school for that and whatnot. And at a certain point, like I think many musicians decided that that wasn't going to pay the bills necessarily, and to maybe look at some other options. So it was around that time that I really started to, I kind of decided on that route of in online marketing. I was really curious about it and kind of excited about it, and I made a lot of effort out to meet people in the industry here in Montreal, where I'm based, and so just started to meet people, and the one thing that really made me excited about it was that the community, especially, I think it's still like that, and at the time it was like that, was really new, and there were not a lot of experts yet, and it was really a welcoming and warm community. People were really nice, and they were willing to share their ideas, and so it was a really great community, and so that's kind of how I got into it, and I just it's been I'm glad I did.
And by the way, what kind of music do you make?
I was making for a long time sort of like pop rock type stuff. Mm-hmm. I had some bands, and then for a little while I was doing more sort of electronic music, working with producers and doing like the vocal for those kinds of tracks. And stuff
On
like
your
that.
LinkedIn, you say music gives you an edge with marketing. Why do you think musicians and all creatives actually make really good marketers?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I think I had a background as well in recording, so in production. So there was the kind of the combination of the artistic mentality, I guess, or just that ability to think creatively, but also having there's also that you need to kind of have a pretty solid, I guess, sort of a technical, just you have to be able to kind of grasp some of those technical things. So I think that creativity and the technical side kind of is kind of a match.
I agree. I just shared an article lately with a client of mine that sells pianos, so they could share it on their social media, getting a little meta here. But the article was all about how pianists, and I'm sure all musicians to some extent, have more developed brains, and the right and left brains are more connected than in non-pianist and musician brains. And that speaks to exactly what you said there. I find having learned piano, having learned music, and really any art, like I said, helps you think and kind of cross those two areas of being creative but technical and balancing those two. I completely get what you're saying there. It looks like you did some work for a site called L&R. By the way, once I saw the logo, I stopped pronouncing it Land R in my head. And of course, L&R means left and right audio channels, I assume. And that's a kind of a clever name. But I'm putting on my SEO consultant marketer's hat for a moment. I'm pretending that I had the task to do what you did. You helped them grow to, I think, 100,000 users in maybe the first year of their product. I'm curious, just real quick, because we're going to get more in depth on SEO for musicians and Bandzoogle, but an overview here. What kind of channels or what tactics did you focus on with that particular company to help them grow? And by the way, for the listeners, they make sort of this software that makes it really easy to master your audio. So normally this is a big, expensive cost. It's thousands of dollars. You've got to send it to a production studio, but it strikes me this is an easy sort of upload your audio file and they master it for you. So that's kind of puts context to the product. What were some things or channels you focused on to help them grow?
Yeah, that was an interesting one because this was a company that was sort of in a way kind of there wasn't a market really for that yet. People didn't it didn't really exist up until Lander came along. There were a few kind of small outfits that were doing something.
Wait, so
I really kind of
I did pronounce it correctly first?
Yeah. We were pronouncing it Lander. That's generally how it's kind of what was settled on eventually. So it's pronounced Lander now. Yeah.
But it does stand for left and right audio, correct?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Okay. That was the idea. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So it is Lander. Go ahead. Sorry.
Lander. So I was coming from sort of an SEO background and there wasn't really a lot of search volume for that sort of thing. So I mean, we were doing we did start a blog and we were focused on the SEO side of things, and we had some AdWords ads running, but they weren't. This wasn't bringing in enough traffic to kind of grow the business as much as it needed to grow. And so we were doing Facebook ads and that type of thing as well. What really kind of made it really pop at the beginning was some of the press that we were getting. It was really interesting actually because it was the idea of the technology is that it automates mastering, which is typically a process that an engineer would do. So it was this. On one hand, it was some people saw it as taking work away from mastering engineers, and also there was which was controversial, and then also the idea that that a machine was doing something that was considered an art form. So it was really controversial. So about half of our feedback at the time was negative and half was positive. It was really, there were people that were just really, really hated us and people that were really defending us and out there without us really getting in the conversation. People are just talking about us because of that. And what kind of stimulated that was some of the press that we got and the word got out, and some of the bigger some of the bigger press kind of outfits, and it kind of just started to spread organically that way, just because it was so controversial. And
So
then that really made everything a little bit easier.
Were there ways that you were able to translate that negative press or some of it into just people signing up for the product, so turning it into a positive thing? Was there anything you did proactively there, or was it just spreading? Was it sort of the phrase, any bad press is good press or something? Any bad press is good press? Is that what it was, or did you proactively try to like change the conversation?
No, we decided not to, because that was pretty much it. And any kind of controversy or any kind of press was good press for us. Whenever there was this kind of surge of conversation, it didn't matter whether it was negative or positive. People signed up in like droves, kind of thing. So our job at that point was to just kind of manage those relationships and make sure that we had, email automation set up and those kinds of things to build off those initial. And a lot of people at the beginning were just signing up just to see what it was all about, even if they didn't like the idea of it. They wanted to see what it did, and so we would try to then kind of change their mind on it and say, hey, this isn't, once they're kind of once they tried it, hopefully convince them that this wasn't a bad thing and that there was a place to use this that didn't necessarily conflict with what a mastering engineer would do. It just kind of complements it, and that's kind of where it went.
So we're going to talk more in depth about Bandzoogle and your growth there later on, but just real quick, just to put some context to some of this conversation, because you've been doing a lot of content for musicians as a part of your work at Bandzoogle, just give a quick synopsis of what Bandzoogle is.
Bandzoogle is a website platform for musicians. So if you are a musician and you want to have a website, which I think anybody from coming from an SEO background would agree is a good idea, Bandzoogle is a platform that just makes that really easy, and it's one of the platforms that's the few platforms that's really focused just on musicians only. That's our only kind of focus, and one of the advantages of that makes it kind of nice to use Bandzoogle as a musician is that we have all the tools kind of built in. Everything's included that you would need as a musician to on your website, typically, like built-in mailing lists and event calendars and a merch store and ticket sales and stuff like that.
That's great. Yeah, and we're going to chat more later on, like I said, about the growth of Bandzoogle. I think you're doing some great stuff there. But first, let's talk a little bit to the musicians and even artists, creatives, and even entrepreneurs to some extent at large in the audience, because I think there's a lot of overlap nowadays with entrepreneurship, music marketing, artist marketing, creative marketing. First, let's kind of start at the top. Marketing in the digital world is really changing a lot. So the last band I was in, this will give you some context to my age and how long ago I was in a band. We were on MySpace, and we collected emails with pen and paper, like right on the stage where we would perform, and kind of input those manually into our email list. That we probably just use Gmail or something. So things have really changed a lot. Like the digital world is maturing. We have lots of things like Spotify, YouTube, etc. Do you think it's easier or harder now for musicians and creatives alike to market themselves in this digital world?
Oh, I think it's way easier. I think it's way easier. There's so many tools now that you can use that are just great tools. I think maybe it takes a little bit more of educating yourself to find those tools and to kind of come up with some tactics that you can use to reach your whatever kind of goals you want to reach. But yeah, there are a lot of great tools out there. I think. And
by tools, do you have a specific type of tool in mind? Do you mean like a tool that helps you, like a SoundCloud? It helps you publish your music and share it. Is that the type of tool you're referring to, or maybe something else?
I think all types. I mean, you have just thinking first of Bandzoogle. I mean, you can build a website without knowing how to build a website. You just use a platform to do it for you. Mm-hmm. You have mailing list tools, so you don't have to collect them by hand. You can even have like a mailing list form, sign up form on your iPad that you sign people up at shows.
Oh wow.
MailChimp does that as well. And you can manage your list that way. You have all sorts of data. You can see where your fans are coming from. The data is really amazing. If you can get that, there are tools that help you understand, like things that marketers maybe would kind of take for granted a little bit, but musicians maybe don't know so much, which is, learning about where your fans are, who's spending money on you, things like that can help you. Like, you can plan your tours. I think probably any kind of mid-level and higher band probably does this already, but planning your tours based on your data of, in terms of where your mailing list signups are from, or your Facebook audience or whatever. So you can build this big audience. There are these audiences around Facebook and Instagram, whatever, and in your mailing list, and you could kind of use all that data to kind of to understand your audience, and from there you can kind of build maybe a little bit of a smarter marketing plan versus when I was doing that as well, like 10 years ago or something. You didn't have any of that stuff, so you had to kind of just wing it. So I think in that sense it's easier. It's probably more complicated because you have to do more maybe than just like do your typical just your typical tour in your area. Maybe you have to get a little bit smarter, but there's a lot out there to make things easier. And there's things like crowdfunding too, which is awesome.
Sure, with Kickstarter. And I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit, because I think in some ways it's a little harder nowadays as well because of all the noise, right? You log into SoundCloud and there's thousands upon millions of choices. Same with Spotify, same with YouTube. So how do you think about that in terms of an artist and musician breaking through the noise? And we see this in content marketing too. Isn't it a little bit harder to that extent? And what can bands and musicians do to cut through that noise? Yeah,
that's interesting. And there's a pretty interesting solution to that. I spoke to Derek Webb, a Bandzoogle member who was a musician. He founded Noise Trade, which is it was bought. I think it was, as I understand, it was bought by Pledge Music, which is a crowdfunding platform, and so there's a successful company in the music space, and he also does a course called Blue Collar Musician, and his approach is interesting, where he really focuses on his tribes. So he really focuses on understanding who his tribe is, what type of people listen to his music, and really uses his data and tries to just kind of grow that core. So instead of trying to go the route of just becoming like a huge, popular, radio star, he's really just focused on making a living based on the audience that he can build.
I'd be remiss to not mention the famous article by, I think, Kevin Kelly, 1,000 True Fans. Are you familiar with that?
Vaguely.
The concept is like, and he wrote this years ago, but the concept being that if you can just find 1,000 raving, passionate fans, that's all you need to make a living. It sounds like what this person you're referring to here is taking a similar approach to that.
Yeah, I think so. And once if you have 1,000 true fans, and especially if they're, you could, you could come up with all sorts of creative ways of monetizing your music by, for one thing, obviously releasing music all the time, but also doing, what one of the things that Derek does successfully is does house shows, house concerts. So he's
oh, cool.
Yeah, he's pretty much booked up like on a permanent, ongoing basis with house shows. He just travels around doing house shows and makes, sells tickets off that, makes good money. So there are all sorts of ways. If you have to get a little bit creative and clever, but if you can build those core fans who actually are willing to spend money on you, as long as you're doing something, that's special and worthy of that, then I think, you can make a living for sure. You'll maybe not get rich, but you can make a living, which is, I think, all that a lot of people want to do. So,
and that was the point of Kevin's article, was that, like, wouldn't you rather do what you want to do and make a normal living rather than work a job that you hate? and you can easily do that. And by the way, for the listeners out there, one parallel running through my mind for this entire conversation, and for you, Wes, also, is there's lots of ways that anybody doing any marketing out there or SEO can use these parallels to bring into their own business. Like when you said people doing a house show, I'm thinking about, how could I take my podcast into like a little intimate venue like that? Or if you're part of a e-commerce website, how could you take your e-commerce website, maybe the business you're doing, and bring that into somebody's home? And it's funny, my wife and I were just chatting about these Tupperware parties they used to do in the 90s the other day, which makes me think of that. People like going into each other's homes and like selling things. So that's a parallel running through my entire mind through this entire episode here. I was curious, Wes, do you know how he gets this data on his fans? Is it through Facebook ads or some other tool? Like, do you know how one would get this data?
Yeah, I think he's using Bandzoogle. I mean, he uses Bandzoogle to build for his mailing list. His mailing list is all on Bandzoogle. You know what? I think I'm trying to remember if he mentioned another tool.
Or I could ask a different way. What kind of attributes would one look for? Is he looking for like age and where they live and other interests? Like what would one look for to figure out who their fan might be?
Yeah, I think he would, I think, well, where they're located, obviously, especially if you want to plan a tour, you have to go somewhere where there's enough of a kind of a concentration of fans to be able to sell out your show. And in his case, it was aiming to sell, for shows, maybe I think like 40 or 50 tickets kind of thing. So it's pretty achievable as long as there's enough people in that area. And then also, you can look at who's spending money. So like, where your fans are who are spending money, because those people are probably going to be more likely to obviously, buy tickets that are in $20 a ticket or whatever. So,
do you know how you find out who the fans are that are spending money? I'm just curious. How would you tell? Is this through the Bandzoogle platform, or is there some other way that people are figuring this out?
I think there are probably quite a few platforms that would help you do that. Bandzoogle does do that, so you could see who's spending money on you and where they are. Yeah.
Yeah, because that makes total sense. It's funny. I was consulting with a client the other day, and we were doing SEO for them, and I thought I gave them some great topics that they could rank for that had lots of search volume. And then the marketing manager came back and said, you know what? We don't make money on those. That if somebody finds us through that search, that's not the customer that's going to actually buy our product. And I think what you're saying there is really a very similar learning for anybody is traffic's great, exposure's great, but if you're not hitting the people that actually have the cash to spend on your product or service, then you're kind of missing out and you're missing the point. One interesting thing that I've seen, Wes, and I don't know if you've seen this. I mean, we chatted a minute ago about how you easily kind of cross from creative to technical. Do you have any insight on getting musicians and creative types that are sometimes very resistant to SEO? And you can see I'm segueing into SEO here. Do you have any insight or learnings or tips about helping people that are resistant to SEO or things that they think are going to ruin their art or make them focus less on music? Any tips or insight for nudging some musicians and creative types along when it comes to that?
Yeah, in terms of SEO specifically, like? Sure,
in terms of SEO, I mean, I know when I have SEO on my bio and Twitter and I'm trying to network with creative types, podcasters, etc., I'm almost certain, maybe I'm being a little paranoid, but I'm almost certain they look at my bio and they say, I'm not going to follow this SEO guy. But I actually identify as a musician and creative more than an SEO to some extent in a lot of ways. So I'm curious, have you seen that as well? Are musicians hesitant to use something like SEO?
Yeah, I think probably a lot are. I think that a lot of it's SEO is one of the, among our audience at Bandzoogle. I mean, it's maybe a particular audience because those are people who maybe are thinking more about their website. But it's one of the most popular topics is SEO, and that's why we put so much effort into talking about it, because it's something that people our audience at least wants to hear about. But I'm sure that, yeah, for other people who maybe are less sold on the idea of doing anything related to websites or SEO, maybe it's more difficult. And I think one of the things that that I really like about what you talked about in your Moz article, and what I tried to focus on a lot too, is the branding aspect that you can achieve in the SERPs, in the search engine results pages, so just like kind of like the visual and branding aspect, I think is interesting. That's something I think everyone could kind of maybe identify with a little bit more easily, and then maybe just like the tangible benefits of it, which are not always clear to musicians. I think a lot of the time, and that's something that you had touched on, which is that a lot of musicians maybe focus on the more traditional value that you get from SEO, that a business will get from SEO, because that's just what people talk about. But actually, for a lot of musicians, it's probably something else, which is more to do with branding rather than getting new fans from SEO.
Yeah.
So kind of explaining the actual real tangible value that you get from it as an artist, probably.
Yeah, let's dig into that. So I'm going to have you explain that a little bit more. And this is something I talked about in my Moz post that you mentioned and in your ebook. How is the fan journey different for a band or musician than it is for an e-commerce store? So if I go to Google, if I sell shoes and I go to Google and I type men's shoes, that's a discovery of maybe my website. So, but how is the journey different for the fans of bands and musicians?
Yeah, I think ultimately it just comes down to how people use search engines, right? Just the nature of how people intuitively use it. Somebody will use a search engine when they want to find something specific that they're looking for. Whereas, which comes in handy for, if the example I had given was if you're Bandzoogle, like us, if somebody's looking for a band website, obviously that's what we want to be there in those search results. But for musicians, people don't look for music that way. People don't look for like specific categories of music. They don't try to discover new bands that way. People aren't trying to discover new music by searching in Google. They'll use like Spotify playlists, or friends will tell them about things, or they'll hear something at a party or whatever. Yeah,
I think the example I gave is nobody's going to Google and typing hipster band to find their next favorite hipster band. That's not how it works. So instead, how are fans using Google to sort of interact with the bands and musicians that they like?
Yeah, so that sort of framework, the fan journey thing that we kind of presented, was to hopefully help musicians understand a little bit better where search engines come in, which is kind of the next phase of like after that initial discovery, when if somebody hears your song at a party or whatever, or hears about you or whatever, and they want to, they don't know who you are yet, but they're interested, they liked your music, that's where they're going to maybe look for you specifically. So that's where they might, once they want to look for you, that's where search engines would come in.
Right. It's flipped around, right? They discover you first, and then they use Google to learn more about you, or to further the relationship, is how I think I said it in Moz there. So with that in mind, what are some things that bands, musicians, and really I want to, again, to the listeners, point out, this is anybody that's created a demand by even being a brand or something that was unknown. People discover you, and now they're using Google to find out more about you. What are some things that musicians can do to improve how their brand appears in search results? Yeah,
I think that's kind of the core of what SEO for musicians is. So I think the first, probably step number one is just having tons of content out there, right? So, my default recommendation is to build a website, obviously, but you can build, just having all kinds of content, like having all of your social media profiles up there and active, and having, if you're notable enough, having a Wikipedia entry, and getting press, so people, even if it's not necessarily a big publication, just having press out there that's going to rank for your band name. So
yes,
just having yeah, so that when people search for your band, they just see all sorts of stuff that they can read about you. And so, there'd be nothing worse than a potential fan searching your band name and maybe just finding your Facebook profile, and that's it. And then all the other results on the first page of Google are like other things that have nothing to do with you. So you want to make sure you kind of fill up that page probably first. I think it's probably the number one thing to do by getting all that content out there.
What can a band do if they have a similar name to other searches that are happening out there? Wasn't there a band named Tool a long time ago? They were like a rock band, or I don't know. I'm just trying to think of bands that have a generic name that also is a real life object. I mean, a brand that comes to mind is Apple, right? Is that the fruit or is that the computer? So are there things a band can do to try to work around that?
Oh man, yeah, it depends. Like there was one of our members, their band name was London Has Fallen. And that was before the movie came out. There was a movie that was like a sequel to, I forget what it was a sequel to, but anyways, it was like a Hollywood movie. And as soon as that movie came out, there was just their any hope they had of ranking for that term was just destroyed. So I kind of was talking to them and trying to help them a little bit. And one of the things that I suggested was to just add a little bit of a modifier on the end of with their target kind of term, which is like band. So like, so people are searching specifically for them, they might add a little modifier to their search term, search query, which is, maybe just specifying that they're looking for the band, not the movie. Yes. So I suggested that they try to optimize instead of London Has Fallen, optimize for London Has Fallen band. In the end, that was kind of like, I think that's kind of in my mind, or at least that I could think of, it's the only real good way to tackle that.
That is exactly the recommendation I make as well. Okay. There's something I've recommended to all brands out there. Again, a brand can even be your name, like Google your name and see what happens, but also plug your band name or your company name into a tool like Answer the Public or keyword.io, any of these long tail keyword tools, and do what I call a branded keyword audit. So this is something, I don't know if you've had the musicians and bands do, Wes, or talk to them about, but you find that people are searching for, band name tour, band name mailing list, etc. And what are some things that bands can do? And then again, tying that to all brands out there to make sure that they're optimizing for all these long tails around their band name.
Yeah, that's a really cool. To me, that's kind of a really fun topic, and I think that probably like nobody does that, and no musicians do this. And I was hoping, that's something that these ideas I was, putting forward as well, and a lot. I think a lot of the same ones that you had as well, and which was to do just basically, keyword research. I mean, that's something that we as SEOs we do. It's a fundamental thing, and so what I was suggesting to musicians was to get that to go through the hoops to create an AdWords account and then use the keyword tool and then just get a little bit creative with as we would typically do with an SEO project, which is to get a little bit creative with figuring out what kind of seed keywords you can think of to start your research. And so some of those keywords, like it just comes down to thinking about how your fans might search for you, if or potential fans might search for you if they have heard your music somewhere. And so that might include, like you said, like your band name with tour or songs or albums, or like a lot of times that you think about, like they might have heard your song but might not know who you are, so they might have like your hook stuck in their head. So they might search for the lyrics, some bit of lyrics from your song. Another example that we talked about, which probably a lot of bands could benefit from, but don't. And there were some examples that we talked about from this in the panel, which is like if you're a band that had some sort of placement in a commercial, for example. Like there was, I forget the exact example, but there was a band. Somebody on the panel had managed at one time, I think, or was involved with somehow, and they had a placement in a Samsung Galaxy commercial. So if you were to search for Samsung Galaxy song or whatever, something to do with that commercial, a lot of people might search for that because they might have liked the song, but of course in the commercial it doesn't say who the band was. So they search for that, and so that as the band, you'd want to make sure you're there, getting that traffic, and not, and if you actually did search for that term, there was like just a bunch of random stuff there that wouldn't help the band at all. So
that's a really interesting one, because that's not even that's what I call the typical unknown, is like when somebody's using Google to figure out what they should even call the thing to begin with. I love that example. We're going to talk a little about Schema a little later on in the interview. I'm curious, Wes, have you looked into or talked to musicians about YouTube and discovery and SEO within that platform?
Yeah, we talked about it we've talked about it mostly from the perspective of just of the regular SERPs. So just making sure that, if people search for your particular specific tracks, like if there's some song that you have and people are looking for that song, that you have your nice little search result, kind of the knowledge panel kind of card there with the typical thing that's there is a little still of a video with a little play button, so people can click on that and then go to a video. So that was mostly what we talked about in terms of YouTube optimization. And that just kind of came down to just making sure everything is named and tagged well.
Sure.
And stuff like that.
I have an idea for you. I think YouTube SEO and discovery for musicians within YouTube should be one of your next ebook or content marketing thing that you do. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of interest in that. YouTube SEO is really, as I'm sure you know, becoming popular among the SEO world. And just with the rise of vloggers and like YouTube really seems to be surging a lot. So I have a feeling if you did some content around discovery within YouTube, that would probably do really, really well. And
cool. Yeah,
I said it here first, folks. I'm curious of your thoughts on band bios. I noticed a post on Bandzoogle that tries to tell bands and musicians how to write a better bio. I'm hoping that this will bring some lessons on just copywriting and maybe storytelling in general to the audience. But quick story here of my own. So I was in Brattleboro, Vermont yesterday. Good music scene all over Vermont, lots of jam bands, etc. But most band bios are so just terrible and lame. So like I remember in my music days, like we used to write a bio that was, something like an inventive mix of jazz, funk, fusion, techno, infused rock, blah, 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 blah. Like it's so boring. My eyes are glazing over. When I'm looking for new bands or artists I'm interested in nowadays, I go to their website. They have the worst bios. They are so dry and boring. Of course, I have to give a shout out here too to Derek Sivers, the pioneer of music and marketing, who I remember talked about writing a good band bio. But that was a little bit of rant of mine. I just see terrible band bios everywhere. And now that I have many years experience in marketing and kind of messaging and copy, I want to fix all of them. But Wes, I'm curious, from your stance, from your point of view, what are some things that bands can do better when it comes to writing their bio?
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. In terms of that post, I didn't write that post. So I wouldn't have any like really good advice in terms of like, in terms of how to make a more compelling bio, I guess.
Maybe this speaks to what you said earlier about a band really knowing their like 1,000 true fans. That's what I said. But your point being about really knowing that very niche demographic and not being vanilla, not being generic or vague. Do you think bands could do a better job at maybe just being more specific about who they're talking to?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's funny because that you mentioned that, because just in terms of the bio topic, the topic of bios, because that's one that it seems, based on how many people are searching for that term, that seems to be a very common problem where musicians just don't know where to start with writing a bio. There's probably a lot of good advice we could give about that. Yeah. I think.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, probably like any kind of copywriting, sort of the fundamental, right? Like, or just marketing fundamental, I guess, is just, like you said, taking the time and doing the research to understand who your audience really are, and figuring out how to speak to them specifically. Yeah.
I'll link to that post, by the way, so people can check that out. I think there were some good tips in there. We're going to take one moment. I'm going to mention my sponsor, BuzzSumo. Wes, have you used BuzzSumo?
I probably have. I know. I definitely know. I've looked at it.
Yeah, I've been singing their praises for 6 or 7 episodes now as they've been our sponsor. And if you've listened to the show before, you've heard me talk about how quick it is, how fast and easy it is to find social share numbers. Like, I went to BuzzSumo, I put Bandzoogle, I figured out the top post that had the most social shares on Bandzoogle. It makes it very fast for my research. But today on this episode, I wanted to point all the listeners to the BuzzSumo blog and 2 recent phenomenal posts they did about content marketing. The first one was titled, "We Analyzed 100 Million Headlines. Here's What We Learned." This post just, it blew my mind. They pulled out the most share-worthy phrases and the least share-worthy phrases that you saw, I believe, in the last year on Facebook. Lots of insights there, speaking of copywriting, that all listeners can take and put into their title writing, their headline writing. Just if you're going to share something, if you're going to create a Facebook ad, there's so many applications for lessons from this post. But then, because that post did so well for BuzzSumo, it went viral, it got picked up by all these top publications. They went back and they wrote another post, "How We Went Viral, Lessons in Promoting Content with Influencers, Ads, and PR." They blueprinted their exact step-by-step process for how they got press coverage, how they used influencers to spread the popularity of that 100 million headlines post. They're 2 phenomenal pieces of content. The first one, I know I'm keeping on hand. Every time I go to write something on social or a title, I'm referencing that. And if you, the listener, goes to buzzsumo.com and uses the discount code DANSHURE, DANSHURE, you will get 30% off 3 months of BuzzSumo. I think that saves you like $75. I did the math one day. So go to buzzsumo.com, enter the discount code DANSHURE for 30% off 3 months. By the way, Wes, no relation to the microphone company, Shure. Although I wish there was. So let's chat real quick about Schema. You mentioned that on Bandzoogle, you implemented 30,000 band websites, you implemented Schema. The first question that comes to mind here is, this is a bit of a feat and a half, right? I mean, let me back up. So many web platforms, when I work with clients, whether it's Squarespace or Magento, they all claim that it's too difficult for them to add Schema implementation or like these upgrades, but apparently it's not. So walk me through the process here, like from beginning to end. How long, like what did it take for Bandzoogle to implement Schema on their entire platform?
Yeah. Well, I think I was really when this sort of clicked a while back for me. I got really excited about it because it was sort of a unique opportunity, I think, for us because we specialize in musicians. We're able to kind of really focus on just the types of schema that are specific to musicians, unlike other platforms that might have to cater to all sorts of different types of businesses and things like that. It's kind of interesting because where it started was a few years ago, before I was part of Bandzoogle, with the event schema. So we have an event a calendar feature where our members can add a calendar with the tour dates and all that kind of stuff. And as far as I can kind of tell, from what I understand, when Google started to support that schema and use that data to display like those nice little tour date carousels in their tour date search results pages and stuff, mm-hmm. It seems like they kind of went out and made an effort, kind of an outreach effort to companies in the music space to try to kind of kickstart the adoption of that. I think that's what I kind of gather, and so we were one of the platforms that they reached out to. and they worked with our team to get that implemented. And so we're the only website platform that does that. And we're, if you look up that topic in the Google developer support pages, we're listed there, along with like there are a few other platforms like some widgets, and I think like Bands in Town and a few other types of like different types of platforms that are listed there that they had probably worked with directly to implement that properly. So that's kind of where it started, and I think probably why a lot of companies, maybe another one of the reasons why maybe some companies or platforms don't support Schema is because there isn't really any clear documentation in terms of how to implement it properly. So there's a little bit of just kind of figuring it out that has to happen, I think. So anyway, that's kind of how it started with Bandzoogle. And then when I joined, I saw that opportunity to add in other types of schema that were missing. So we did that, and it wasn't that difficult for us, just because like we have, like for adding, for example, the album schema. We have like the players. We have like the whole infrastructure that's already with all the data that's already there. So adding in that other layer of schema was fairly straightforward.
So you had event, and you mentioned album. What are some of the other types of schema that Bandzoogle has?
The other one would be you might maybe call it like the music group schema. I think that's what we called it, which is just like something that you'd have on your homepage, basically, which is just identifies your website as being the homepage of a music group.
Ah, I see.
And then all the data associated, like information associated with that. And then there's also like the same as kind of schema where you can for all of your there's a list of certain types of social profiles that you can specify in your schema to say that these other profiles are the same as me. Yes. So it just helps you kind of tie together all of your online presence kind of together. So
all the other platforms out there, Squarespace, Wix, whoever's listening, get your act together and get schema on your platforms. Bandzoogle did it. You guys can do it too. Now, let's talk about Bandzoogle's growth. So as I mentioned at the top of the show, as I do with most of my guests, I put the domain in SEMrush. I saw some great growth for Bandzoogle in terms of search traffic, but I want to go broad first a little bit. We talked about the importance of a musician understanding their fan's journey. I'm curious, what is Bandzoogle's fan journey, or of course, customer journey?
Oh yeah, I think that's probably a little bit more typical for any kind of online kind of pure play business, which is that there's obviously the discovery, the awareness aspect, just making sure that we have a presence at events and conferences, and we're part of the community, the communities that that are relevant to us, which is basically any musician community. So we put a lot of effort into that, into just having like being a positive, maybe a sort of like positive, proactive presence in those communities. We do a lot of like this type of thing, I guess, like giving like practical, useful advice, hopefully that people hopefully get value from and use. So like that education side is really important to us. So that sort of thing, just building awareness and being like a genuine part of the community too. Like we're all musicians at Bandzoogle, and we come from that place. So like we're not like a big corporation that's trying to dominate the market. We're here, and we're musicians, and we're providing something to other musicians. Kind of that's the idea. And we put a lot of effort into that. We're a small team, so there's a limited amount that we can do, but we do as much as we can. We do a lot for our size, and then after that, we just make sure that we're there and we're present when people do look for us. So look for band website builders. All the SEO and paid ads and all that sort of stuff. We're focused a lot on that as well, and then lastly, when people do subscribe or sign up to your trial with Bandzoogle, we put a ton of effort into having awesome, like, really kind of blow people away with the support. And that's something that people, if you read like reviews about Bandzoogle, member reviews, that's most of the time, that's what people rave about is the support. And so we have a really awesome support team. And so we try to just, we try to not just do the good job selling, but we try to really make sure that when people are in and using it, that we just, we really blow them away with and make them happy with using the platform. So yeah.
And as I mentioned, your search traffic looks very strong. I'm going to mention a few search terms that you're ranking for here. Is how to promote your music, 1,900 monthly searches. You rank number 1. I think how to make money as a musician, band bio examples. We mentioned that earlier. I pulled up one post, 17 ways to promote your music online. It ranks really well, gets lots of great traffic. I know you didn't author that one, but I'm curious. If you're not intimately involved with this part of the process, that's fine. We'll skip over it. But if you are involved, what's the process that kind of leads to a post like that being written and published that can end up driving traffic? Do you have I want to dive into this for a moment. So let's back all the way up to sort of the beginning. How do the ideas come about for the posts? Yeah,
that's interesting. And that's probably something that a lot of SEO people like yourself encounter a lot with businesses is when, and I've encountered this so many times where, this is kind of how it kind of all came about with Bandzoogle's when there's a kind of a blog team making great content, and then when you as an SEO you come in with some SEO ideas, a lot of times there's a bit of resistance because unfortunately, as SEOs know, there's a bit of like an association with SEO with kind of spammy stuff. Mm-hmm. A lot of people think of that a lot first, which is something that I try to overcome a little bit, and by talking about better practices than that sort of thing. So where it kind of all came about was when I joined, there's already like a really amazing kind of foundation of advice and content, and the really great team already in place, with a schedule, it was cranking out this content, and all we really did is when I joined, was to start to kind of work in some SEO fundamentals, mm-hmm. Of basically just starting with keyword research or tools like BuzzSumo kind of thing to come up with mm-hmm. come up with tools like that to figure out what kind of topics are being talked about and things like that, and to focus more like the demand side of content, I guess, like figuring out what people are looking for and then writing to that. Mm-hmm. So that's basically all we did, was start to kind of adjust where our topics came from to focus a little bit more on or just being informed by what people are looking for. So we didn't change a lot other than just being informed on what people are looking for, and then that allowed us to kind of tailor our content a bit more that way. And because we already had that really good base of just really, really awesome content to begin with, just by making that adjustment, that's kind of when you see that organic growth, that's basically what that was the result of that.
That's something I do a ton with clients. They're already blogging, creating quality content, but there's literally no keyword research. And really, we all mean topic research at this point. There's no topic research or targeting. And you just come in and give them that slight nudge in the right direction, and their traffic can really explode. It sounds like that's what's happening here a little bit. So, number one, you're leveraging keyword research, topic research, and targeting. I'm curious, just sort of in a logistical sense within Bandzoogle, do you folks use a tool to gather ideas? Do you brainstorm together? Does one person come up with them and put them in a spreadsheet? How does that process look?
We meet once a month to kind of go over the past months of results. So we'll there's usually already a list of kind of general topics we want to cover, and then we'll once a month we'll meet. We'll look at how our rankings went the past month, and usually when we publish a post, we have some posts have that kind of SEO objective to them, some don't. So the ones where we do have an SEO objective, we see how well that worked, and things like that. We'll look at just like the traffic that's coming to the website, where it came from, which posts are resulting in more trial signups, that kind of, because certain topics attract people who are maybe more likely to subscribe to Bandzoogle.
How do you track that within analytics?
With Google Analytics, yeah.
Do you use like gold tracking or?
Yeah, gold tracking. Yeah, pretty much just gold tracking. Exactly.
And so then you choose your ideas. And sorry if I interrupted your flow there. Is there more beyond that process? Do you get them into like a calendar or? That's as far as coming up with content ideas go. That's more or less it. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of it. Like we do have like a calendar that goes, with different types of content that goes way into the fall kind of thing. At this point, but are you using all Google Docs and free tools? Do you have any paid tools you're using for that?
We were using Trello, and then we recently kind of moved everything over to Basecamp.
Cool, Basecamp, yeah. Also, are all your writers in-house at Bandzoogle, or you use outside writers as well?
Yeah, it's a mix. Like there's like I did a bunch of SEO posts. Obviously, one of my colleagues, Dave Cool, who comes from like he's been doing this sort of thing for years and years and years, like being involved in this community where he's on tons of panels and talks about this stuff all the time. So he occasionally writes some things and does some ebooks, and he manages the whole process. And then we have a few people on the support team who contribute a fair bit because they have their unique insight into these topics. And of course, like we obviously publish updates and news about Bandzoogle as well.
Yeah, and that's a lesson for everyone out there. Sorry to interrupt. Get your support team creating content for you. That's a super hack you're using right there.
Totally, yeah. And we're a small team too, so we kind of like with, as is typical with small teams, we all wear quite a few hats. And then we do get we look for authoritative writers to contribute as well. So we do have contributors, but they're like really selectively chosen, and they're usually like pretty well known people who authoritative people who contribute.
Is there one person, you may have mentioned this, is there one person providing sort of editorial oversight over everything? Because one issue I see a lot with my clients is they'll get a writer, an outside writer, and the content's okay or terrible. And there needs to be a lot of editorial oversight when you're using guest authors, and even the support team. They might know what they're talking about, but might not write in an interesting way. So do you have one sort of person overseeing all of that?
Yeah. All credit for that goes to Dave Cool, who manages the blog, and he finds all the writers. He comes up with the content ideas and content calendar, and all that stuff. So he has that oversight, and he like I said, he kind of comes from even before joining Bandzoogle, he was doing a lot of that sort of thing. So he has like he has, I guess, standards and principles that he kind of goes by. So the quality of what he expects is high, and he understands what is good advice and what is not good advice. What makes good content. So that I think you're right. That's sort of something we maybe take for granted a bit at Bandzoogle, but it's probably like a really fundamental part of the recipe for sure, is having that
super important. And then on the promotion side of content, and by the way, if there is no promotion on the content, it's not like I have an issue with that. A lot of my clients, because they're in the right space, they publish quality content and they get rankings from Google. And I usually lean on not having to do link building or extra promotion. But at Bandzoogle, do you do anything to give your content a boost, or do you just kind of put it out there?
We talk about it all the time, but we're really like we have less than zero interest in doing anything even remotely spammy, anything in the spammy world. So, which a lot of people in the SEO world, that tends to be a place that some people go anyway. But we steer clear of that. And so, yeah, all of To promote our content, I mean, we have 30,000 people in our community, so we have right away we have like 30,000 people to kind of seed our content to, you could say, in the platform and via email, and to our social channels. We do boosted posts and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Speaking of promotion, I want to ask if you have. This is a little more of a fun question for me. So I was just researching for this interview. I had just loaded Bandzoogle's website in my browser. I stepped away, I opened Instagram on my phone, and there was an ad for Bandzoogle. And I don't know if that was coincidence or if maybe Facebook and Instagram's ad platform is that quick. Are you aware of running retargeting or something on these ads?
Yeah, that would be me. Yeah.
Incredible. So give me some insight there, because I think a lot of people are looking towards, and it sounds like maybe you're a little involved in this. A lot of people are looking towards Facebook and Instagram to get some leverage and exposure. So has this been a valuable channel for Bandzoogle?
Yeah, it's always a tricky one. I think that the challenges that we face with Facebook, advertising on Facebook, is something that a lot of people are faced with. And I see Facebook like trying to address that, like they did recently with what do they call them?
I'd help you out, but I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, it's the custom. I forget what they call it, but the custom audience, where you can upload your customer list with the lifetime value. I think they call it the lifetime value customer list or something. So you can kind of like you can tell Facebook who your customers are that actually. And how valuable they are to you, and then they'll use their modeling to try to find you more of those higher value customers.
So they do a lookalike off of the email list for customers that have a high lifetime value, rather than just I mean, the standard, and I'm not super familiar with this, but the standard lookalike is all your email addresses, right?
It would be all your email addresses, exactly, or like if you use it based off of your website pixel kind of thing.
Ah, I see.
So that's coming from I think the challenge that we have, and probably a lot of companies have, which is getting good ROI off your Facebook ads, because they're expensive, and unlike Google, where the people that are coming through those channels are typically they're ready to buy. They're looking specifically. They're at that stage in the customer journey where they're ready to use your tool. Whereas in Facebook, that you're kind of just finding relevant audiences, but they're not necessarily ready to, in our case, build a website right away.
Yes.
So the result of that is that our cost per acquisition is way too high for Facebook. So that's something that we're already always trying to overcome. But the awareness aspect of Facebook is awesome, because you have such a huge audience. You can reach them in really cool ways. And then, like you said, the remarketing is great. And that's something that we do with mostly with Facebook, so to reach people.
Let's chat about the ebook just real quick in terms of how you used it for content marketing. I still think people could be leveraging ebooks. I still don't think it's really an overdone thing. They have to be quality, of course. I've seen some really crappy ebooks out there, but I'm curious. This is like a 130-page ebook on SEO for musicians. How long did it take you to create this thing?
Oh man, hey, way too long. Way too long. Yeah, I mean, the whole process, if you factor in like the South by Southwest panel and all that kind of stuff, like the amount of work was just crazy. Like, and yeah, I mean.
Do you feel that it got you the ROI or return on value for the work?
We've just been recently trying to measure, like we've been looking at all the different types of content that we do, like including like webinars and ebooks and our blog content and videos, and trying to figure out like what the tangible value is for us. Trying to look at trying to see if we can measure like how many trials and paid customers we get that come through them and stuff. It's really hard, obviously, because it's really hard to measure everything. So we actually don't really know if we get we don't know if we get as much value out of it that we put into it into these types of things when we do something like this 130-page thing that took forever. So, I mean, we kind of decided to keep doing them. Probably do shorter ones that don't take quite as much time. But we're kind of going a little bit on feeling, like we feel like that they provide value. And of course, with things like ebooks that are downloadable, they allow us to do things that like regular blog content wouldn't, which is like gating it and stuff like that.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned going on a feeling there. I'm going to go on a slight little rant here for a second. Not really a rant, but something I think super important. It's an area of opportunity for many marketers that I think you and I understand as musicians, going on a feel, going on the faith that we know that there's some value in this. We can't measure it. But so, for example, to come full circle here, you originally found me by probably Googling SEO for music, and my Moz post came up. You invited me to South by Southwest. I didn't make it, but what's the ROI of like one person finding content that gets me at South by Southwest and all the benefits that could bring? Because I think, as you mentioned, it would have brought a free pass, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's important for everyone to try to remember these anecdotal results that happen that you can't attribute. Like, my Google Analytics isn't going to show me that you, Wes, found me on Moz, invited me to South by Southwest, and then I end up on this panel. And then if I were to have done that, maybe I would have met some, you know what I mean? There's all these connections. And I think, and maybe you agree with this too, Wes, is that a ton of opportunity lies there for everyone listening, because so many people that try to be logical and mathematical don't go there. But if you invest in these channels and ebooks and posts and etc. that you think really are going to have value, I think that's just a huge area of opportunity, because so many people aren't doing that. And you just, I don't know, you just know that they're going to work on some level. So that's my little rant about that. Do you agree, Wes?
Yeah, I agree. I think my kind of philosophy, I guess, that would be like, I try to measure everything. I think you should try to measure everything. But of course, you'll never be able to measure everything. So measure everything that you can measure, and then after that, I think you have to depend a little bit on like just understanding the fundamentals, understanding like just having a good like head for marketing, I guess, and understanding how things all work, and from there you kind of have to go a little bit on a little bit on faith. And
yeah,
I like see that like with link building, for like with the content promo, going back to that, like I know we saw just last month we had like this really nice .edu link from somewhere, some university somewhere or whatever. We had no idea how that came about, but there it was. And that, it obviously came about from all the other unmeasurable stuff that we do that eventually, got us this nice little link.
Yeah.
So,
it's there, It happens. So do you have a few more minutes, Wes? I've got a couple fun random questions here towards the end.
Cool.
Good. Got a few more minutes. Awesome. Yeah. SoundCloud. They almost like collapsed. What are they, in your opinion, Wes? You're in this field as well. What is SoundCloud doing wrong? Or maybe does this speak in general to the challenges with audio platforms?
Oh man, the one thing that I can't. I mean, I'm sure that they have they must have talked about this internally, and they must have some reason that they haven't done it. But I don't understand why they haven't done native advertising. To me, that seems like a obvious thing. I mean. Just there's no let's just take me for example as a marketer who wants to reach musicians. That would be a good kind of a perfect platform to look at to advertise on in some way or do marketing.
So they've had like pop-up ads I've seen, but so how would the native ads paint a little picture here? How would that look on SoundCloud? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, something maybe a little bit along the lines of like YouTube, like, I mean, in that case where Google bought YouTube and integrated their integrated with their AdWords platform, to allow sort of self-serve access to YouTube native advertising, where you can put pre-roll ads and whatever kind of, all sorts of different types of options.
And it's more targeted.
And the targeting options, yeah. So as for an advertiser, like understanding what advertisers need, and then making it self-serve, scalable, that sort of thing, in a way that's going to be, not that's not going to put off, users of SoundCloud, obviously, which I think they're. I mean, YouTube figured it out, so there's got to be a way to do that. I don't see why. It seems like the obvious way to monetize SoundCloud, like they have like their premium accounts, which I have. I pay whatever, like $7 or I don't know how much a month to SoundCloud for my like premium account as a musician. But I'm sure that doesn't make them a ton of money. And because musicians don't have that much money. I mean, we don't have money to spend on all sorts of things like this. But advertisers have lots of money. So that, I mean, to me, that seems like the obvious thing.
How do you feel about audio platforms in general? Like Anchor seems to be, are you familiar with Anchor? It's the audio app. It's a little bit like audio Twitter. All these audio platforms seem to have a little bit of trouble grabbing on. Do you think just audio in general in a platform sense has challenges, or has nobody quite just really cracked the code on it yet?
I feel like it's just a matter of cracking the code. I mean, in terms of the sort of the self-serve platforms like SoundCloud, where you kind of upload your own music sort of thing?
I think in terms of publishing audio, and this can even go beyond music. So podcasting, for example, is really weird because it's run on primitive RSS feeds, yet Apple figured out a way to turn RSS feeds into this huge platform, and they're like the number one place to get podcasts. But in terms of like so YouTube is the actual platform itself, right? And it's the network, it's like the social channel all in itself. There really doesn't seem to be a place, maybe arguably SoundCloud, but a place that truly hasn't made an audio platform where you upload the audio, where you engage with other listeners on the scale that something like YouTube has done for video. Do you think that's just a challenge in general with audio because of the medium, or is just nobody really figured it out yet?
I think it's just, I mean, SoundCloud was the one who should figure it out, because I mean, they're sort of like the YouTube of music, right? Of audio.
Yep.
And I think that's why everyone's kind of freaking out a little bit about SoundCloud, like potentially closing down, because like, what would we do without it? There are some other ones like Mixcloud and stuff. I'm sure somebody would come along to replace SoundCloud. But I'm sure, I just looking at it from my limited view, but I imagine everyone's probably looking to SoundCloud to see what happens with them first, because they're the obvious solution to that problem, because that's where they are. They're in that position to do that. And if they can't do it, then who can, sort of thing. So
yeah. So you put together this South by Southwest panel. I realized at the beginning why I had trouble saying it, because in SEO we have SMX. And I just saw the letters and like I was getting all messed up. So I might edit that at the beginning. Do you have any anecdotal tips for getting a panel accepted for South by Southwest? Because yours got accepted. So what do you think worked there?
I think having well, first of all, what I really tried to do was first of all, have a topic that people wanted to hear about. And from what I could tell, there's the past few years, there's been like one SEO panel every year. So I was hoping to be like the SEO panel for this year, which worked out. And I think having really authoritative people on the panel obviously is important. Like people on the panel who maybe are a little bit known or something, that certainly helps. And also having I really tried to you can have up to 4 people on your panel. I think it's like 2 to 4 or something, but trying to bring into like different perspectives. So like I was on the panel having put it all together and written this ebook and stuff like that, and coming from Bandzoogle, where we have a lot of artists, blah, blah, blah. We had actually a musician on the panel too, who's also kind of does her own kind of marketing consulting as well for musicians. So she kind of had the branding kind of creative musician perspective. And then we had Mike King, who's like super, SEO rock star. And then,
and the rapper. So,
yeah, exactly. So basically just trying to bring in like as many different like angles on the topic as possible. And I think that really helped a lot.
And it's largely known for being in part a music event with all the performances. So that probably made it interesting as well to a lot of the people that were there. Awesome. Sorry, was there one other thing you wanted to add there before I cut you off?
No. I think that was what worked for me. And I had heard from people that this panel was being kind of talked about in the South by Southwest kind of circles. So I think, and also I think probably helped. Apparently that Mike had been asked a few times by Southwest to come talk, and so I was very flattered that he chose to actually do the panel that I put together, because I guess I know he'd been asked to do it, and he decided to do the one that I put together. So I was really flattered that he.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Wes. I have one last question for you as a Canadian. I've had some Canadian guests on the show, but I went to my stats. Only 4% of my listeners are Canadian. Do you think I'm doing something wrong? Like, is there a way that as having an SEO podcast, I could better market to the Canadian audience?
Oh man, geez, that's funny.
How 4%? Can I?
Well, yeah. In all fairness, I mean, the population of Canada is about a tenth the size of the U.S., so it kind of makes sense that proportionally speaking, that kind of makes sense.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was that much lower. Sorry.
Yeah, so 4% maybe makes sense. And then there's the fact that maybe a third of the Canadians are primarily French speaking too. So when you factor that in, the number, the proportion probably makes sense.
Maybe I just need to say croissant more often.
Yeah.
That's the only French word No, I'm just kidding. I took French in school. I just can't really speak it. And I'm not going to do that on air beyond croissant. But anyways, sorry to interrupt you. Were there any last thoughts there on getting the show into Canada? Do a Canadian tour?
Yeah, you could do a tour. You could, talk about maple syrup and moose.
That's funny. All right, Wes. Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure having you on the show. You can probably hear him fading up the music. Tell us where people can find you online.
WesWells.com, Bandzoogle blog,
Twitter, LinkedIn.
Twitter. Wes Wells on Twitter, yeah.
And LinkedIn Wes Wells as well?
Yeah.
Awesome. Just his name, folks. It's that easy. Wes Walls. All right, Wes, thank you so much for joining us on Experts in the Wire, and we will speak to you next time. Thanks.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dan. Great speaking to you.